cheating wife skimmed money from our business to fund her affair. I made sure she left our union with nothing to her name. I've discovered that my wife, Pauline, has been doing some fishy business with the finances for the business we run together for years now. I've never been the guy who takes care of the books for the business because she actually studied accounting, so it has always naturally fallen to her. I'm not saying that I've never ever looked at the books before, but I've never had to fully scrutinize them over the course of months or years to see where things were going wrong. I'm so lucky that I eventually had reason to dig the truth out and figure out what was going on. The only question I'm stuck with now is why, because I don't know what is going on or what her motivation could possibly be. The two of us own a small restaurant in our hometown. It's not the kind of business that looks like it'll be doing ridiculous numbers anytime soon, unless one of those famous food influencers makes a stop and enjoys what we have. However, it gets the bills paid. The revenue is enough to sustain the overhead and pay us salaries that get our own expenses taken care of. So as far as I'm concerned, that's good enough. That's the bare minimum, and of course, we want to make sure that we do better. However, I started to get frustrated with how it felt that despite everything we were doing, we weren't able to get our numbers to increase significantly. We had owned the business for about 7 years at that point, and it didn't seem like things had improved as much as I would have wished them to. To be fair, after the pandemic, we lost a lot of our progress. So after that point, it was almost as if we were starting from scratch. We were able to build quite a bit after that point, but I still feel like we didn't do much in surpassing the numbers that we were at pre-pandemic. It was like a job for the two of us, but not a real business that had any hope of giving us a much better life, and I didn't like that. So one day, when I was in a particularly crappy mood, I decided to look at our prices, our costs, and how much we were bringing into the business. I wanted to know if it was time to look for cheaper suppliers, to increase our prices, or something else. Understand that I had absolutely no reason to ever doubt my wife. You wouldn't doubt your partner of doing something nefarious, like embezzling money from your business, unless you had a solid reason to. I didn't have any reason to do that, at least not before I went through the books for several hours. I realized that our margins were fine. Supplier prices were fine. We didn't have an overwhelming amount of wastage. Our own salaries weren't anything exorbitant, and slashing them any more was going to make life much harder for us. I noticed that by all indications we should have been making good money, but by the end of the month there'd be just enough for us to scrape by, and that worried me. I know Pauline's a good accountant, so I knew she couldn't have been making mistakes. Even if you're making mistakes in the books, if you're bringing in money, you'll know that you're bringing in money. The books might not agree, but the money in the bank would. In our case, the books agree with the money in the bank, but I couldn't see any reason why the numbers were meant to be as low as they were. Again, my first instinct wasn't to think that she was doing something nefarious because I had yet to see obvious foul play at that point. I just knew that the numbers were not speaking the way I expected them to, especially with the amount of revenue we were bringing in every month. Since the revenue didn't seem to be a problem, I decided to look at the overhead costs and costs of our supplies. The overhead made sense until I noticed a few repairs, typically in the high hundreds or in thousands of dollars. A fridge repair, a leaking roof, broken glass, different things that sounded normal, but that I couldn't recall us having to do, at least not at the time that the costs were supposedly deducted. I blamed my memory at first, but the more I thought, the more I was sure that we didn't have a fridge repair in the last 6 months, and we certainly didn't have a window to replace in ages. It didn't make sense to me. If I worked a full-time job and I was only in the restaurant half the time, it'd be easier for me to not know about the finer details. But I run the business as much as she does, so these aren't the kinds of things that should slip by me if I really paid attention. The problem was that I wasn't paying attention to the books as much as I should have been, because I had utmost faith in my wife. I didn't think anyone was going to tell me it's a bad thing to trust your wife. It's not. That wasn't where the strange costs ended. When I decided to look at the cost for meat supply, I noticed that instead of 4 deliveries a week, we were doing 6 in some months. That instantly didn't make sense to me. I had been the one to devise that side of our operation. I chose to take all of our deliveries on a single day of the week. It made things busy on that day, but it freed up the rest of the week for pure services. So we weren't meant to be taking deliveries on Tuesdays, but on several occasions, I could see payments made for meat deliveries on Thursdays. It wasn't every week, but it was happening more than it should have been, and it shouldn't have been happening at all. The day I discovered all this, I had chosen to stay in late. She had gone back home, which is why I had all the time to look through the books. By the time I was done, I realized how late it was. My first thought was that I needed to confront her and ask what was going on with her numbers. But since she was the only person behind our numbers, I knew that whatever was happening was a very intentional choice, and I didn't like how it made me feel. The instant emotion was confusion, a lot of it, but I have chosen to hold my cards close to my chest. I'm going to figure out what is going on, but as long as she doesn't know that I'm onto her, I'm going to have plenty of time to verify things. The fact that she's trained in accounting actually makes it worse, not better. It means if something's off, it's very unlikely to be accidental. People don't just accidentally invent repairs you never saw or quietly change ordering patterns that only she controls. You're smart not to confront her yet, because if this is intentional, the second she knows you're onto it, anything you haven't found yet will disappear or suddenly make perfect sense on paper. So yeah, keep digging, quietly. Get everything lined up, because when you do confront her, this can't be a vague, something feels off conversation. Update 1. I was able to get another chance with the books for the business that I run with my wife, Pauline. She's an accountant, so to be honest, I've always left her to deal with the money side of things. I have enough to deal with in the restaurant's operations, so I've never seen a point in interfering there, until I got fed up with how little growth our business was seeing. The next time I was able to access the numbers, I did some calculations to see exactly how much the suspicious charges amounted to. I wasn't sure how far back they went, and the farther back I went, the less I could declare whether certain charges were suspicious or not. But as far as I could confirm, there was well over $30,000 that had been siphoned slowly over the course of years. I felt like I was going to lose my mind, because even though that's not so much for a business when spread over the 3 years, it is still a lot of money. It can upgrade equipment, it can hire a part-time worker, it can do a whole lot for us, and it was just missing, which I was struggling to really understand. I don't suck at math, but I don't consider myself to be a whiz. She studied accounting, so she has to be good with math. She's better than me, and that's probably why she was able to get away with things for so long. I decided that if I really wanted to figure out what was going on, I was going to need to talk to someone, an actual accountant. So I hired a forensic accountant, gave him access to the spreadsheet that Pauline does all her numbers on, and I waited. When he got back to me, he told me that based on what I had told him, there was definitely some foul play going on, and from the looks of things, it was the typical mismanagement of funds, embezzlement going on, with the business partner listing costs as going to one place while they were going to another. Because her business is small, he knew that she wasn't going to be doing anything extreme to hide her trail beyond the falsification of our financial documents. So, he said the next thing he needed to see was the account statement, and after I gave him access to that, it took him a little under a week to get back to me. He didn't play around. He told me straight that Pauline was stealing money from our business. It was bad enough that she was doing that, but it became worse when he told me that he knew exactly where the money was going, and it wasn't to any account in Pauline's name. That made sense because she wasn't showing up at home with a brand new Birkin or anything like that looked like she was spending a lot more on herself. It made sense when he told me it was all going to one of two places. It was either landing in her account, outside of her salary payments. Otherwise, it was going to a man's account, a Stephen R. I didn't want to believe it right off the bat, but the first thing that came to mind was that Stephen R. was her affair partner. There was little else that made enough sense to explain why money was going out to that person at an occasional rate over the course of years. I searched up the guy and found out everything about him. I knew what he looked like, where he worked, and that he lived in the same city as us. I felt a strong sinking feeling in my stomach when I realized that because that made it even more likely that the man was my wife's affair partner. I felt like I could move past her siphoning funds if she had a good explanation for it, but if she was really cheating on me, that was unforgivable. There was no way whatsoever that I was going to move on from that. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to rest if I didn't figure out the truth and whether or not Pauline had been cheating on me with another man. And on top of that, sending money from our business to him and herself, it was the highest form of dishonesty, and it was going to eat me up if I didn't investigate. I didn't wait for another night. As soon as she went to bed that night, I grabbed her phone, went to her messages, and searched for Stephen right away. Rather surprisingly, it wasn't that hard for me to find the guy. She had his number saved as Stephen, which isn't a bad tactic if your husband had zero idea that you're cheating on him. I remember my heart pounding in my chest as I chose to look through her messages. It's silly, but for the sake of our marriage, I remember thinking that I just wanted to see them talking business so I'd find out that he was just some guy she was investing money with. Or, of course, I would have been exceedingly lucky if that were the case. Nope, that wasn't it. It was exactly what I thought it was going to be. Stephen was her affair partner. The two of them were sleeping together, and they were using the money from our business to make sure that they could keep their silly affair going. There were more messages where they were flirting, messages where they were being aggressively sexual with one another, and messages where they were arranging meetups. There were messages after the meetups too, clearly indicating that they had slept together. I made sure to screenshot everything and send it to myself because that was going to be my greatest evidence, besides years of her stealing our money. I realized just how many lies I'd been living under because of her. She would tell me she was going to visit family in another state, but she was planning a trip to Cancun with her affair partner, paid for by me. When they couldn't get away, they'd get a room in an expensive hotel or go to a restaurant. There was so much of a big life being lived on our money, and I felt like a complete fool for not having noticed it for so long. I remember, after putting her phone back, just sitting up in our bed and staring at her. I was thinking some very dark things, which I obviously won't say here, but it was fueled by a deep hate for her. I loved her, and I wished that we could have gone on forever. I loved our business too, and I really dreamed of it blowing up and getting another location, but that was never going to happen since she had been stealing our money instead of letting us put it into the business. She doesn't know that I know any of this, but she's going to find out soon. I have no option but to meet with a divorce lawyer and make sure that we end things. I refuse to be played for a fool any longer, and I'm going to make sure that I get every last dime out of her. All the money that she spent on her affair partner needs to come back to me and the business. Update 2. A lot has happened in my life. If you had told me that this was going to be my fate a few years ago, I would have told you that you don't know what you're talking about. Now, here I am divorced from Pauline, a woman I loved with all my heart, and instead of being absolutely devastated, I'm just sad and mostly relieved that this entire saga with her has come to an end. I hate being lied to, and she lied to me so badly. I was in so much pain, and I needed to make sure I inflicted the same pain on her. I told her that I was interested in seeing her parents, since it had been ages since I had traveled to see her family. She didn't mind that. In fact, she was excited to have me want to go and see them without her needing to prompt it. She didn't know that I planned to confront her on her cheating and her fraud when we got there. We were meant to be there for Saturday and Sunday, and I made sure that Saturday was a perfect day. However, on Sunday, sometime before I knew we were going to set out to head back home, I decided to start a ruckus. I told her, her parents, and the one sibling who was also at home that I had something important to tell them all. Quite naturally, they all looked very intrigued, most especially Pauline, who would have expected to know whatever it was that I wanted to surprise them about. It breaks my heart to say, but Pauline has been cheating on me. She nearly leapt out of her seat when I said that, and her instant response was, "What the hell are you talking about?" I could tell from how much she was trying to keep her composure that she knew I had her cornered. It was so obvious to anyone who was paying attention that she was lying. That's when I decided to give them the story, minus the part where I knew about the money. I wanted to make sure that came as a surprise to her, and so that she didn't have the chance to fix things in that regard. I told them about checking her phone and seeing the chats with Steven. The story wasn't as satisfying without telling them about the money, but I knew I was going to tell them after the divorce, which I did. She stood up and shouted that I was lying, but I just shook my head at her. I told her that if it wasn't a good decision to say that I was lying when she knew that there was evidence on her phone. I told her to let her brother check it, but she said it was an invasion of privacy. I gave her a final chance to let her brother check it, but she shook her head. So instead, I passed my phone around and gave them a chance to look at the screenshots, which I compiled as a PDF, so it was easy for them to just scroll through the conversation. There was a lot of quiet as they went through it, and at multiple times, her mom made sounds or her dad shook his head. I knew that it was worth it when I could feel their disappointment. Pauline was looking at me, but the moment I met her eyes, she just looked away. She had been the one to light the match by cheating on me, but she couldn't handle the heat that came from the consequences of her actions. Her mom was crying by the end of it. I don't know if it was what she read or the knowledge that her daughter was the reason we were going to get divorced. I hadn't even said it all at that point, but before I left, I made sure to let everyone know that there was no hope for us, and it wasn't my fault. I drove home and entirely silent. I did want to leave Pauline at her parents' place, but I was enjoying how uncomfortable she was, and I knew that the ride back was going to add to that. She didn't say a single word to me for 2 hours that we were driving, and I didn't mind. I knew the silence was killing her. When we got home, I went straight to the bedroom, and she knew not to join me there. She did come, not to sleep, but to beg. She sounded so frightened to me. It was somewhat amusing me. She said that she wanted to talk, and I asked about what. She said about what had happened at her parents' house. I told her that she was just there to beg, not to tell me that I had somehow magically misconstrued her entire conversation with Steven, then there was no point. After a few minutes of standing and saying nothing, she left. She knew there was no point in begging. I did think of sticking around in that house, but I wanted to leave everything that had to do with her behind, including the house that we were renting. When she saw me packing out, she was shocked, but she didn't say anything. Let me fast forward to the actual divorce proceedings. She learned that I knew about the money, and that sobered her up even more. I refused to negotiate. I wanted things to go to court because her lawyer wanted to make sure she got something, and I was going to give nothing more than the house. Her lawyer didn't agree to that split, but thankfully the judge did. She had stolen so much from our marital assets, and as people who aren't very rich, that heavily offset what she was supposed to walk away from our marriage with. She had a few thousand that she walked out of the marriage with, but that was it, besides the house, which she would still need to pay rent on. Her lawyer really tried to fight for her. He tried to get her alimony, but the judge wasn't having it. Not only did this woman cheat, but she stole from the business that was meant to put food on the table, and she stole a lot. There was no reason to empower that kind of woman. I remember her crying when she realized her settlement was going to be essentially nothing. 2 months of rent in the house I left to her was going to wipe it all out. When we left the courtroom, she tried to approach me to talk. I will admit that I was super curious about whatever it was that she might have wanted to say to me, but I chose not to let my curiosity win. I just walked away, and it felt good when my lawyer said she just stood there looking pathetic. Being cheated on isn't fun, but I had to deal with a lot more than that, and I came out alive, so there's no one out there who won't be able to deal with it, if they have to. Don't sit through a miserable marriage, is all I can say. The $30,000 is bad enough on its own, but what really hits is what the money represented. Like you said, that's growth, stability, less stress, maybe even a future expansion. Instead, it got rerouted into hotel rooms and flights with someone else. If anything, the biggest takeaway here is that you didn't ignore what you found. A lot of people would have second-guessed themselves, avoided digging deeper, or accepted a weak explanation to just keep things intact. You didn't. You followed it all the way through, even when it got worse, and you closed the door on her completely. Good for you, OP. Have you ever discovered something in a relationship that completely changed how you saw your partner overnight? Let us know below.